Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Neil.
Now, it took me 5 takes to get this thing right because I kept introducing the podcast, which you should also check out. But for now, do you like Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Do you like FromSoftware?
Hell yes.
Do you like Hidetaka Miyazaki?
Whoa, yes!
Well, I've got a rumor for you. Don't get too excited about it, but it might be true. So this is going to be doing the rounds as George R.R. Martin teaming up with FromSoftware. Now, the pieces to put in place are you need to establish a timeline. So back in March, Liam Robertson, who's a freelance journalist and also the channel Spawnwave on YouTube, said that there was a ludicrous FromSoftware rumor doing the rounds that it might come out in the future kind of thing. But that was kind of it back then. That was kind of all we got. Last night, after the Game of Thrones finale, George Martin put out a blog post on his personal blog and said that just randomly as a sentence at the end of his blog, he was like, "I've been consulting with a studio out of Japan for a video game."
How many wheels is that dude spinning plates?
He's not spinning the book plates.
He's not. Is he?
So
really not.
Man just wants to do something other than finish the book. So whatever. So we kind of thought, well, maybe that could be the thing because FromSoftware, obviously based out of Japan, Dark Souls style combat and fantasy stuff might line up with a Game of Thrones style game. And now Gematsu have updated that whole thing with a lot of insider rumors and sources that they have. This is when I'm going to get very specific.
Come on.
So
tell me more.
So the thing to keep in mind is that beforehand, the rumors in March, George Martin was listed as a consultant, and it was said that they were potentially working on something, and George Martin was this consultant. Gematsu's thing says that he's actually the lead writer, and that he is going alongside Hidetaka Miyazaki, and that the two of them are collaborating on this new project, codenamed GR.
Brilliant.
Which isn't, sure.
Yeah.
And so there are some specific details as well. Apparently, codename is GR. Apparently, it's been in development for 3 years. It's an open world game with horse riding.
Sounds like
horse riding.
Sounds like Two Worlds.
No, nothing sounds like Two Worlds.
That sounds exactly like Two Worlds.
Two Worlds sounds like everything else.
Two Worlds 3.
What are you thinking of Two Worlds?
I don't know. I'm scared.
Kingdoms of Amalur? Where we just throwing any RPG in here? So apparently it's an open world with a whole bunch of horse riding, collaboration between Miyazaki and George Martin himself, and also that it's going to be revealed. This is the juiciest bit.
Come on.
Revealed at E3 2019 during Microsoft's conference.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense though.
Why?
Because although FromSoftware have collaborate with Sony quite a lot,
yes.
Sekiro was officially unveiled on Microsoft's conference in 2018. That's when we got the name. I know we got the little teaser at PSX, but we got the full blowout on Microsoft's conference, so that would maybe make sense.
Yeah.
Not really tied to Sony anymore. That was only a Bloodborne and Demon Souls kind of deal. So next month, are we going to get this?
Apparently. It seems
reveal?
like obviously all these things are going to trickle out at a slower pace. Obviously they're going to wait. They want a whole big win. It's Microsoft's E3 to win, considering that Sony aren't going to be there. So something like this would be a massive head turner, even if it is inevitably multi-platform anyway.
So, right, I'm just throwing things out there. Is it going to be a Game of Thrones game?
Well, assumedly. Because what's the point of not doing one? There hasn't been a Game of Thrones game since 2012, and don't count the mobile apps. Sorry, Mum. But I think that if you go to the console Game of Thrones games, in 2012 we had one created by Cyanide, which didn't review necessarily very well. I actually quite liked it.
Yeah, it was all right.
It was a nice idea. You played as different members of the Night's Watch, and it was kind of Dragon Age style combat, like pause and freeze frame and decide what you want to do next. I really liked that. The voice acting, especially, and the characters were great, and a whole bunch of consequences. I'll stop talking about it, but the story was all right. But yeah, there hasn't been one on console since 2012, so it's not, there's especially post the end of the whole show, there's clearly a gap to be like, well, why can't we play as any of this stuff? Which I guess leads us into what would you want to see? Where do you want them to play as characters that we know and love? Arya going off to the other region, spoilers for the finale? I
think I'd want to do a sort of Telltale-esque thing where it's set in the world, but you don't necessarily play as one of the
That was the
main
last
characters.
Game of Thrones game.
Was it really?
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Telltale did a Game of Thrones game.
Yeah, but I want it to be good.
It was all right.
It was fine.
You didn't get killed by Ramsay Bolton?
I'd like that more. When this rumor was doing the rounds a long time ago when it was first broached, and apparently he was doing something with FromSoftware as a consultant or whatever, I was kind of like, ooh, From don't really just need to attach someone's name to it, just to give them a bigger star boost. But if it's a proper Game of Thrones game and he is actually writing it, that's cool, because FromSoftware can bring the world and the mechanics and the gameplay and make that really awesome, and then George R.R. Martin can bring the authenticity of the actual world itself.
Well, yeah,
that'd be a cool match.
Something like, you think of the combat model in Sekiro, that idea of one mistake and you're done for kind of thing. Yeah. If you can bring that into some battles and make it so you've got this really intense, really consequence-heavy different battles, like Battle of the Bastards or Hardhome or whatever. Something like Sekiro kind of does lend itself to a fantasy setting, where you're kind of matching blow for blow. It's all about defensive play, and then that one one final hit, like when Jon Snow took out one of the White Walkers, then that kind of translates across quite nicely.
Yeah.
To go back to that, when he was the rumors from March though, they said that it was the open world thing with different kingdoms and different abilities to collect from each area, which would be like a more sort of, I don't know, skill-based character or something than what we've had in most of the FromSoft games. But I also kind of wonder about FromSoft, because they did Bloodborne for Sony, then they did Sekiro for Activision, I believe.
Yes.
And it's like, are they then gonna, kind of go back to doing Game of Thrones as a Microsoft exclusive? Maybe they've thrown their money around for an E3 exclusive.
The Microsoft exclusive bit would be huge because it's being published by Bandai Namco, which I'm just pulling this out of my bottom. I hope it's not an exclusive, because I think even though Bloodborne was great, I think that was potentially a bit of a mistake. I like that these games can
be everywhere.
Be everywhere essentially. Yeah, like they deserve as much sort of praise and the biggest audience they can get essentially.
True.
In my opinion.
Yeah, it's weird. We're in a weird state, because for the longest time it was like, we're going to abolish exclusives. In the gaming industry in general, it was like no console should have these massive exclusives. And then Sony went, well, we're just going to have Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So whatever. And it kind of just went down this other route. And I just wonder whether, Microsoft or any sort of console to sustain, you want to get people playing your system, you're going to need things like this to bring people in. And like I said, it's Microsoft's E3 to lose. And if they don't have many exclusives lined up, which as far as I know they don't,
it's a good point.
Something like this could be associate Game of Thrones with Xbox, and you kind of go from there.
That would be a big win. I wonder, even though we all love, we loved potentially on Who You Talk To, Game of Thrones.
It's a thing.
It's a good time to sort of launch this. Would there be people who are sort of like, oh, why is From doing a licensed game, if that makes sense? Even though we've come a long way, like you said, with Spider-Man, and especially the Middle-earth games, they did so much with that license in an interesting, unique way, but there's still kind of a stigma attached to it that it might be seen as a bit reductive, especially when From are so good at delivering their own original IPs. Like Sekiro, awesome. Bloodborne, awesome. Dark Souls, awesome.
Yeah, that's the thing though with FromSoftware, because obviously they started out as like a smaller studio and they made these massive strides to get bigger and bigger. And even something like Sekiro, when they signed with Activision, obviously some of us kind of went, oh, does that mean that there'll be some Activision jank up in there? And there wasn't. Sekiro is very much an artistically focused game that plays very tightly and isn't burdened by a lot of the practices and problems that Activision bring to the table. So in making those strides to get bigger and bigger, maybe this is just their time. That FromSoftware, actually we've been eyeing up this thing, and we're apparently friends with J.R.R. Martin.
Somehow. Brilliant. What is interesting to me is that obviously if he is writing it or has this kind of involvement, that would sort of imply that this is going to be a more narrative-heavy game, and we haven't really seen that from especially recently. Even though Sekiro was more open with its story and stuff, it was still very opaque and abstract, and you had to figure out a lot of that for itself, whereas Game of Thrones is notoriously dialogue-heavy. It's more about the people being in rooms talking, like Simon Gallagher said earlier in our little
Check out our coverage
on
the Game of Thrones channel.
Rather than these big epic fights. So I wonder if that would be even a good fit for FromSoftware.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because that's the one thing missing. You go from Souls to Bloodborne to Sekiro. Sekiro has proper, for the first time, proper cutscenes, a voiced protagonist. You have all these kind of basic staples of other games that we've seen everywhere else, but they're big deals for FromSoftware to try and do. And for me, Sekiro's story was enjoyable enough. I like the lore more than I do the story. Maybe the one thing that they're missing is a really great writer to write a truly great story that is as good and as engaging as the combat.
Yeah.
That might just be the one thing that they're missing this whole time.
But if George R.R. Martin is writing it, that means we'll get the game in about 2030.
When he's dead, and then two fans will come in and finish it for him.
Probably.
Yeah, it might be that. Which worked really well for the show, depending on who you talk to. But for now, let us know what you think down in the comments below. Are you excited about Game of Thrones game being made by FromSoftware and with George Martin on lead writing duties? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Third take. Nothing happens in the finale.
Look, my son, look at the marvel that I have created. Look at the quality fabric hand-stitched by blind orphans, the perfect letter spacing calculated so meticulously that Rich Hudson had an erection for months about it, and a colouring so deep that I had to buy the dye off the dark web. Oh no, the beast has grown angry, angered by our drab fashion choices. I am such a fool to think that it wouldn't try to infect us with its perfect design. Quick, we must do something to appease the beast. Why don't we buy one from shop.whatculture.com? Look, it's already got Scott Nash.
Oh no!
Shop.whatculture.com! Quick, let's go and buy one right now! Let's go buy one right now!